Hey everybody, welcome back to the Let's Talk Q&A show. This is the weekly show where I answer all of your burning questions. And I want to thank everybody for sending in questions for this week's show. We got so many of them. Either you sent them in on last week's show or you waited till the post that I put out on Tuesday. Either way, or I really appreciate all you guys sending in some great questions for this week's show. If I don't answer your question on this week's show, I'll definitely answer it on next week's show. We'll just have to see how the time is going because we do have a lot of great questions and some that are going to take some time. So without further ado, let's dive into the first question, which is something I've never done before. And this is from Haunted Pillowcase, and he wrote, for next week's show, can you do a Martin Scorsese tier list of his filmography? So I've actually never done a tier list here on the channel. I'm somebody who loves to make lists, so I always try and crack it down to a top 10 list. But we're going to go down Martin Scorsese's entire filmography, starting with Mean Streets. So anything he did before Mean Streets, like Boxcar Bertha, I've never seen before. That was like in the Roger Corman produced system. It's not really a great movie from what I understand, and he also directed one movie before that, so we're not going to include those two films. And we're also not going to include all the documentaries he's directed, like The Last Waltz, because he's made so many of them. You can even buy a collection of like all the documentaries he's made. He's made a great one with his parents. It's only like 30 to 45 minutes long. He just filmed it while he was at their house for dinner, asking them stories. It's a great little documentary. It's also on one of the Criterion releases with a bunch of his documentaries. I can recommend that, and The Last Waltz is an absolute classic if you've never seen it before. Definitely check that one out on like the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. That has a Criterion 4K Blu-ray release as well. So we're only going to talk about his films that were released theatrically, starting with Mean Streets all the way through Killers of the Flower Moon from last year. And this even will include The Last Temptation of Christ, which I watched for the first time for this very list because that was one big blank spot in my filmography, especially for Martin Scorsese. I had to see The Last Temptation of Christ, so finally buckled down and checked it out for this tier list. There's still one Martin Scorsese movie in there that I haven't seen yet. We'll talk about it when we get to it. That won't obviously have a spot on the list. And let's start right at the top with Mean Streets. So the tiers are going to be, for the top tier, we'll have pure cinema. Underneath that, we'll have great. Underneath that, we'll have good. And then finally at the bottom, we'll have bad. Because Martin Scorsese doesn't really have any bad films, but there might be some. We'll find out in a second. So right at the top, we got Mean Streets. And this is the movie where Martin Scorsese really got on a lot of people's radar. It's also the first time we see him working with Robert De Niro and Harvey Keitel, people he would work with a lot in the future. And I would put this movie under the good category. It's not great. I've watched this movie a few times. You know, you can still see he's got some work to do, but I've really enjoyed this film overall. It's also got a good Criterion 4K. He followed that up with Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, starring Ellen Burstyn. You know Ellen Burstyn. She also, I believe, won an Academy Award for this film. She plays a widowed woman who's trying to raise her teenage son. And it's a good movie. You really watch it for Ellen Burstyn's performance. But other than that, it's one of those movies where I didn't particularly love it. I just kind of appreciated it a little bit more. And then he followed that up with Taxi Driver. And this is the first one that we're going to put in the pure cinema category. Whereas Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, I'd put that in the good category. But Taxi Driver is probably Martin Scorsese's best film of the 1970s. Travis Bickle, played by Robert De Niro. Harvey Keitel pops up in this movie. It's really a great character study of a man lost in New York City with really no direction. What the hell is he gonna do? And it builds up to a fantastic conclusion. It's got some of the most famous lines in film history in this movie. So that one's got to go under the pure cinema category. And then next up, we got New York, New York. And this is the first film I'm going to put in the bad category. I'm not a big musical fan. Martin Scorsese, again, early in his career, he's still trying things out. I just don't think it worked necessarily with New York, New York. Next up, Raging Bull from 1980. This movie secured Robert De Niro an Academy Award for Best Actor. Well deserved. This goes under the great category. Why not pure cinema? I feel like this is one of the harder ones to go back to and rewatch, but still, what a great performance by Robert De Niro. He gained all that weight for it. It's just a really, really, really tough watch, but still a fantastic must-see film if you haven't seen it. Joe Pesci is also fantastic in it. Next up, The King of Comedy, which wasn't very well received at the time, again starring Robert De Niro as Rupert Pumpkin. You know, a guy kind of just lost. He wants to be famous, and he decides to kidnap Jerry Lewis, He thinks that's a good idea. This is really what's going to lead him to fame, give him his big break in comedy. This movie and Taxi Driver are clearly two huge influences on the first Joker film, but this movie, it's actually as funny as it can be. It's also really, really scary that people are out there like Rupert Pumpkin, just lost, wanting to become famous, and they don't see a way out or a way to do that. So this was the only logical way. He thought, okay, I'll kidnap Jerry Lewis, and this will really give me my big break. Well, you'll have to see the movie to find out how that works out. So the King of Comedy would go into the good category. Next up, After Hours. I'd put this one in the great category. I absolutely love After Hours. Has a great Criterion 4K Blu-ray. People have finally started to notice how good this movie is. The nightlife in New York. Anything could happen. And anything does happen. Cheech and Chong pop up in this movie. It's got some great editing, a great score, and beautiful visuals. Just a great Martin Scorsese movie that finally people are starting to appreciate, and that's why it goes in the great category. The Color of Money. I'm putting this in the great category as well. I know I like this movie a lot more than most people. Some people probably put this in the good, maybe even bad category, but I think this is one of the great sport films out there. Paul Newman won an Academy Award finally for his role in this movie, playing against Tom Cruise, the young hotshot in this film. Also, Mary Elizabeth Master-Antonia is in this. She is great as well. I love the needle drops in this movie, including the Phil Collins song at the very beginning of it. First of all, not only do I love that song, but I always will go back on YouTube and watch that scene. I just think he used that song perfectly. He uses a lot of great needle drops in this movie. It just done so well. And I've never understood why people don't love this movie. Again, it does have all the sports movie tropes, but it's still a great Martin Scorsese film, so it's going to look great. The way he's using the camera with the zoom-ins and the zoom-outs, it's all done so well. I really do think that if you haven't seen The Color of Money, it definitely deserves that great position. Next up, The Last Temptation of Christ. So this is the one I watched yesterday morning in my preparation for this question. And man, I was so wrong about this. I don't know why it took me so long to see this, because this is a fantastic film. Willem Dafoe plays Jesus. Now, this isn't necessarily based on the Bible. It's actually based on The Last Temptation of Christ. Martin Scorsese wanted to originally make this in the early 1980s, around the time where he made The King of Comedy. He almost had funding for it, and 1982 was a bad time for Martin Scorsese because people shit on The King of Comedy. He lost funding for The Last Temptation of Christ, but eventually he did get to make the movie he wanted to make. The score really feels like a 1980s score. It does really feel like a movie that came out in the 1980s, and I think what really lifts this up to like that good tier and almost great tier. I don't think I can put it in the great tier. What lifts it up is the story and his last temptation. What happens at the end of this movie, really to tie the film together, I thought it was beautiful. And as somebody who's not a religious person, which is one of the big reasons why I didn't want to check this film out, despite the fact that I've seen other Martin Scorsese movies which have huge religious overtones in them, it's just I'd never really want to go and see this movie because I just felt like it was going to be a retelling of the stories we already knew. It kind of is, but it kind of isn't as well. It really does take some leaps and bounds in this movie, and I think for the better. So I really think you should check out The Last Temptation of Christ if you're one of those people like me who took a long time to finally go and see it. He followed that up with, in my opinion, his best film, pure cinema. This goes into 1990s Goodfellas. I absolutely love Goodfellas. Most people love Goodfellas. It is one of the most rewatchable, if not the most rewatchable. Ray Liotta gives his standout, career-defining performance. Robert De Niro gives another great performance. Joe Pesci won an Academy Award for this movie. I can watch this movie 2 or 3 times a year, and I'll absolutely love it each and every single time. There's a reason why this movie is in my top 10 all-time favorite films. It is Martin Scorsese's best film. It is pure cinema. And then he decided, to go back and make a little bit of a smaller movie. He decided to do the remake of Cape Fear, and I would put this in the good category. I don't think this is one of Martin Scorsese's greats. This is clearly him paying homage to Alfred Hitchcock, which he would do in a bunch of his films, but all the angles in this movie. You also get Nick Nolte, Juliette Lewis, but Robert De Niro is scary as hell in this movie. When I watch Cape Fear, I can't help but think of the Simpsons episode that basically just did this all over again with Bart and Sideshow Bob, but I still love that episode. It always makes me think of Cape Fear. Again, some great camera work in this movie as well. What a great performance, but I had to put it in the good tier. Next up, The Age of Innocence. I don't really particularly like this movie. It stars Daniel Day-Lewis, Winona Ryder, and Michelle Pfeiffer. I only saw this movie once. It's a period piece. It just wasn't a movie that really spoke to me. The acting is great. I can't deny that, but this just wasn't necessarily a movie that was made for me, if I could put it that way. It's not one of my favorite Martin Scorsese movies, but we'll still put it in the good category because it is a good movie. Some people might even put that in the great category. And he followed that up with pure cinema again. Casino from 1995. A lot of people said this movie is very similar to Goodfellas. It is very similar to Goodfellas. We're bringing back a lot of the same players. Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci. The way this movie's structured, it's structured very similar to Goodfellas and The Wolf of Wall Street. I go back and forth. Do I like Goodfellas more or do I like Casino more? It's really tough. I will give the edge to Goodfellas just because some of the stuff with Sharon Stone and Robert De Niro, I feel like they dragged it out and they kept going back to the same story beat too many times. But either way, or the beautiful production design, the amazing acting, you can't go wrong with Casino. And this is the one movie that I actually haven't seen, so I can't give it a ranking. That's Kudan. This is the story of, I believe, the 14th Dalai Lama. I really can't say anything about it because I haven't seen it. And from what I understand about that movie, too, Disney buried that movie and it only made $6 million at the box office, apparently, to avoid some controversy. And that's a shame. Followed that up with a good film again. This time bringing back Paul Schrader, who wrote Taxi Driver. Paul Schrader also wrote Bringing Out the Dead. This one stars Nicolas Cage, and very similar to Taxi Driver. It looks beautiful again, but it does also kind of feel like a pretty significant step down from Taxi Driver if you were to compare those two films. Either way, or it's a good film, and it's also got a Paramount Presents 4K Blu-ray that I haven't seen yet, so I'll put it in the good category. Gangs of New York. This was a huge passion project for Martin Scorsese, and this is a good movie. And what really stops it from being a great film or even pure cinema, because the production design, the sets, that's all done so well. Daniel Day-Lewis gives another incredible performance no matter what movie he's in. At least he stands out. I believe he won an Academy Award for this. Well deserved. But Leonardo DiCaprio and Cameron Diaz are miscast in this movie. They're both just not giving great performances. Some of their worst performances in their careers, in my opinion. Some people like Leo's performance in this. I really just feel like he's too reserved in it. I feel like he's also a little bit too young at this point. I think if you give Leo a little bit more time, maybe put this out 10 years later, I think this would have been a much better film. Either way, or the opening is still fantastic and there's still some great scenes in it. So I still have to say it's a good movie. He followed that up next with The Aviator, another good movie. And Leonardo DiCaprio, he's better in this than he is in Gangs of New York. He plays Howard Hughes, the Aviator, and also a filmmaker himself. And what really stood out to me in this movie, and the thing that defines this movie, is the amazing cinematography. As we're going through this guy's life, the cinematography, the colors might change, and that's why I think The Aviator would be a great 4K Blu-ray. It's just not one that I run back to, but it's still a good movie. Shutter Island. Some people might be surprised that I put this in the great category. Again, Martin Scorsese kind of returning to horror, making this thriller mystery, something similar to, again, paying a little bit of an homage to Alfred Hitchcock. Some people might not say this doesn't necessarily feel like a Martin Scorsese movie, but it builds up to a fantastic conclusion that's definitely going to leave you thinking. I think the ending is pretty obvious. I don't think it's really that open to interpretation, but my wife disagrees with me, so maybe some other people out there disagree with how this movie ends and how I feel about it. I'm not going to spoil it here, so we'll have to talk about that in the comments. And the next one, another great movie, Hugo, which people kind of mistake as an animated movie. It's not really necessarily animated. It kind of looks like it, but either way, it's a beautiful film paying homage to those early filmmakers. And I have to put this in the great category. This has a great Arrow Video 4K Blu-ray release as well. Definitely check out Hugo if you haven't seen it. And then, of course, another pure cinema, The Wolf of Wall Street, again starring Leonardo DiCaprio, one of his best performances, telling the story of Jordan Belfort. This is where Margot Robbie really got put on everyone's map. She is incredible in this film. And, very similar to Goodfellas and Casino, we're seeing the rise and fall of one of these not so great people. That's the thing. People kind of fall in love with these characters, but they never get away with it. A lot of people will argue that, they're kind of glorifying crime. Not necessarily. They never win in the end. I mean, Jordan Belfort, a little bit. He only went to jail for like a few years and then was able to write a book. The guy's probably still fucking rich. It's ridiculous. But either way, great movie. And then he did another one of his passion projects, and this is Silence, that starred Andrew Garfield and Adam Driver. And I really enjoyed this movie. I really did. I went and saw this in theaters. I didn't love it, though. This is one I definitely would put under the good category. I could see why this would be a passion project for Martin Scorsese, but I didn't necessarily love this movie. And next up, The Irishman. And I was going back and forth between good and great with this, because even though this does kind of feel like one of those sprawling epics where we're going through so many decades, very similar to The Wolf of Wall Street, Goodfellas, Casino, what Martin Scorsese does best when you think of Martin Scorsese movies. I just feel like it's a slight step down from those movies. Joe Pesci and Robert De Niro are back. Robert De Niro kicking that guy in the street is just absolutely ridiculous. It's just really hard to buy into that. And I mean, I get it. We had to do the de-aging technology. It just doesn't necessarily work. Joe Pesci called Robert De Niro a kid early in the movie. I'm like, these guys are 80. They look like they're 50, so they're not kids. So that stuff kind of would take me out. I mean, it might not take other people out of the movie, but it would would take me out of it. Al Pacino and Jesse Plemons are still really good in this movie, so we'll put this under the great category, just slightly great. Then the next one is Killers of the Flower Moon, the last movie he did that came out last year. I will put this one also in the great category. I love this movie. Again, Leonardo DiCaprio, Robert De Niro, kind of another one of those sprawling epics. And I've only watched this movie once, and that was in theaters, but I walked out of that feeling great. Felt like that was one of the best movies of 2023. You know, as time has gone on, it didn't sit with me as much as I thought it would, but it's still a great film, and I'm sure I'm going to love it on rewatch. Where's our physical release of that? I mean, I don't understand how that has never gotten a physical 4K Blu-ray release here in the United States. Italy got one, but we haven't gotten one here. That's very disappointing, but we'll put that one in the great category as well. So thank you so much, Haunted Pillowcase. This is my first tier list. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I had fun making this list this week. Thank you so much, Haunted Pillowcase. And let's go on to the next question. And the next question is from Sprazy110. He said, have you considered doing a major reorganization of your collection? Are you happy with how it is? So I'm actually due for a reorganization because it's been about a year and a half, and that usually when I do my reorganization of my collection, that's when I'll make my collection video because I pull everything off the shelf and then I reorganize it. I just am not sure what exactly I want to do. I'm on the fence if I want to just do a complete alphabetized collection, just because I want to keep all my directors together, and I also want to keep certain studios together, like the Criterion Collection and Kino Lorber. But the thing that really sucks is, like, for example, we just talked about Martin Scorsese. Martin Scorsese has releases from the Criterion Collection, from Arrow Video, and then movies that have not been released in any collection, like The Color of Money, that just have a Blu-ray release, a horrible Blu-ray release at that. So if I want to keep all my Martin Scorsese movies together, unfortunately, I'd have to take them out of other collections, which I really don't want to do. So I kind of have it set up right now where I have like Criterion in their own spot, Kino in their own spot, and then I kind of have like sub-directors, like where I'll have all the rest of the Martin Scorsese movies that doesn't fall into like the Criterion Collection, or if like he doesn't have any Kino Lorber releases, like things like that. You know, same thing with Quentin Tarantino. Luckily, Tarantino doesn't have anything released by a boutique label yet. That'll change with Inglourious Basterds. But right now, all my Scorsese stuff's together. So I'm kind of on the fence, like, what should I do? And actually, if you guys could recommend to me what you think is best, do you guys think that alphabetizing your collection is better? Or do you do like little subsections? Like right now, I have little subsections for directors and studios. Then I have it alphabetized in genres. So like I have my dramas together, my horrors together, comedies together, action, you know, so on and so forth. What do you guys do? I'm very curious about that because I do want to do it, but I'm just not sure what route to go. Thank you, Sprazy. I appreciate that, buddy. And the next question is from our channel director, Mr. Smelly Potato. He says, what's a movie that you like but no one else seems to like? So my gut said Frequency. I think people have come around on Frequency from 2000, starring Dennis Quaid, and I love that movie. I always have loved that movie ever since the time I saw it. Maybe it's the New Yorker on me and them being Mets fans, but there's always something special about the movie Frequency to me. You know, it's a father and son story. A father who dies tragically in a fire in the 1960s. Now he's able to communicate with his son through a ham radio in 1999, played by Chim Caviezel. And you would think, okay, that's a very heartwarming story. And then they throw in a serial killer storyline in the middle of it, where the serial killer, because Dennis Quaid survives, now that serial killer is going to kill his mom, and we got to somehow save the day in 2 different decades. And now we have to somehow save the day 30 years apart while these 2 people are just communicating with each other. And of course, it builds up to a very happy ending with a great Garth Brooks song. So that was probably one movie that I've always loved that other people don't seem to love as much as me. But a movie that people really shit on that I think doesn't deserve it is Daddy's Home 2, a Christmas movie. And maybe I forgive it a little bit more because it is a Christmas movie, but I actually feel like Daddy's Home 2 is much, much better than the first Daddy's Home movie, starring Mark Wahlberg and Will Ferrell. You know, in the sequel, they bring in John Cena, who's doing a terrible job acting in it. But you also bring in Mel Gibson and John Lithgow to be the fathers to these 2 people. And I just love their chemistry. Again, you know, maybe it's the Christmas stuff that you forgive a lot of that, but still, I feel like it's overall a very good, entertaining, funny movie. Bill Burr has a great little cameo in it as well that just will make me laugh out loud. And I think people were a little too hard on Daddy's Home 2. Now, Daddy's Home 1 is a piece of shit, but Daddy's Home 2, I really do think it's actually a pretty good Christmas movie, and I can recommend that. So that was a good question, Mr. Smelly Potato, our channel director. Thank you so much, buddy. The next question is from Kenny Crayley Jr., and he wrote, who are your top 10 superhero actors and actresses for both film and TV? So I made a list of this, and I only picked like superheroes. I didn't pick villains, so these are only going to be superheroes who are actors or actresses. You know, they don't necessarily have to appear in more than one thing, but I wanted to pick the people I thought have done a fantastic job acting, whether it be on film. And I don't think I got anyone for TV. I'm not a really big TV watcher, mainly because my commitment is to film. There's a few shows out there I'll definitely make time for, but I don't watch every single show like I try and watch every single movie. So this is in no particular order or anything. The first name I got written down was Michael Keaton. I'm sure not anyone's surprised by that who's been watching this channel for any amount of time. Michael Keaton is Batman, but Michael Keaton also pops up in an MCU movie in the first Spider-Man film in the MCU, Spider-Man Homecoming, as the villain, and he is great in that movie as well. He shares a great scene with Tom Holland in that.
I bet you were glad when your old pal Spider-Man showed up in the elevator, though.
Michael Keaton's one of my favorite actors, so this might be a little bit biased, but either way, I mean, he appeared in two Batman films. He appears in the MCU, and then he, of course, appears in last year's The Flash, and he was supposed to appear in Batgirl as, the Michael Keaton Batman from the Tim Burton franchise. We didn't get to see that one, but I was glad to see him back. And speaking of Batman, the other great Batman, not my favorite, but close, is Christian Bale from the Dark Knight trilogy. He does a great job, even if his voice is a little ridiculous at points when he changes it. It just sounds like he has cancer. It's ridiculous. The next one, Chris Evans, another guy who's played two superheroes, and I love how they play with this in Deadpool and Wolverine. If you haven't seen it, I'm sorry I spoiled it for you. I'm sure you already know about it.
Oh my God, he's gonna say it!
Say what?
Avengers!
Flame on!
Sorry, what now?
But, he was the Human Torch in the two Fantastic Four movies from the 2000s. And then, obviously, his claim to fame is as Captain America in the MCU. And, honestly, he struggles outside of those roles. The only other movie I can really think of, I'm like, he's good, I guess, in Knives Out, the first Knives Out movie with that ridiculous sweater. But still, I just feel like he's struggled outside of these superhero movies. And speaking of people who don't struggle outside of those superhero movies, who had a career before they became a great MCU actor, and probably the defining MCU actor in Iron Man, Robert Downey Jr. And he's coming back to the MCU to play a villain, but he'll always be Iron Man to most people, despite the fact he was a Academy Award nominated actor well before that. But, this is when his life got turned around and people just know him as Iron Man. And Robert Downey Jr. is just perfectly cast. And the next up, I got Christopher Reeves from the original Superman movies. Has there ever been a better Superman? I know people love Henry Cavill. I love Henry Cavill. I'm very curious to see what happens with the next Superman movie. It's just that Christopher Reeves, he has the look, he has the charm. He is Superman. He's the guy, when you think of Superman, they got it right the first, well, I guess he wasn't the first one, but they got it right with those Superman movies. And Christopher Reeves, when you think of Superman, that's who you think of. Next up, I got Gal Gadot. Maybe you wouldn't think of Gal Gadot when you think of Wonder Woman, but when you finally saw her on the screen in the DCEU, most people agree she was one of the best people chosen, perfectly cast. Probably didn't think she was that great of an actress when you saw her in the Fast and Furious movies, but she is perfect as Wonder Woman. And speaking of being perfectly cast, as Harley Quinn, Margot Robbie was perfectly cast in those movies. Now, obviously, Lady Gaga played Harley Quinn in Joker Folie à Deux. Haven't seen that one yet, but in the movies that they brought in Margot Robbie, because she's in both Suicide Squad movies, and then she obviously got her own movie, she is always phenomenal in those movies. Chadwick Boseman, he was the perfect Black Panther. That's why you didn't want to recast him, because you had the perfect Black Panther, and it was a tragedy when he passed away. From the first time we saw him in Captain America Civil War, you were like, they did it. They knocked it out of the park with this guy. Chadwick Boseman was a great actor, and he was the perfect Black Panther. Next up, Elizabeth Olsen. Again, as the, you could argue, like, what is she doing with her accent? It kind of comes in and out depending on what the movie is. But I do think she's the perfect Scarlet Witch. And when she finally got on the show WandaVision, I was like, okay, this is where she finally gets to show off her chops. I think she is perfect in this role. And Elizabeth Olsen, she's a great actress. I don't feel like she gets enough credit for her work, but people do know her as Scarlet Witch, and she is great as Scarlet Witch. And then I think I had a villain written down. That was a mistake. So the other person I'm going to go with is the actor from Daredevil. Ben Affleck played Daredevil back in the day, and he was a fine. My dad loves that movie, so I always think about that movie a lot, because for some reason, the only person on this planet who likes the 2003 version of Daredevil is my father. But the Netflix, well, I guess it started out as a Netflix series, and then now it's a Disney series, whatever the hell's going on. The actor who plays Daredevil is perfectly cast. He was great. I love that show for the first couple of seasons, then it kind of fell off, just because it felt like that Netflix Marvel shows, they were connected to each other, but it felt like Marvel didn't want to acknowledge them, and then, of course, they got canceled, and it became a whole thing. But that is also a great actor and a great role, and thank you so much for that question, Kenny. I really do appreciate it. That was a great question. And the next question is from Bill Whistler, and he said, "Are you a fan of the movie Son of the Mask?" And the answer is absolutely fucking not. I hate Son of the Mask. I'm hoping that, I'm saying that and you're not a fan of it and I just broke your heart. I'm sorry if I did, but Son of the Mask is the sequel to The Mask from 1994, starring Jim Carrey. Jim Carrey, nowhere to be seen in Son of the Mask. This one's the one that stars Jamie Kennedy. And it's just terrible. They tried to make it a kids movie. I don't know who this was for. I guess they felt like Jamie Kennedy at this point. I mean, Jamie Kennedy, I guess, was really famous at this point in the early 2000s. Malibu's Most Wanted was, it's got kind of a cult following. I love that movie. He's from the Scream movies. I hate that movie. The plastic look to the hair, it's ridiculous. It's terrible. Next questions are from Frank's ex-wife, and these are just like quick shooter questions that we're going to bang out. And he said, "For next week, do you prefer Coke or Pepsi?" Coke, 100%. Pizza or wings? I'm actually not a big pizza guy. I prefer like white. I'm not a red sauce guy. That's really what it is. And obviously, pizza for the most part has red sauce on it, unless you get like a white slice or like a chicken bacon ranch slice. And I usually just will say, we don't need to go to the pizza place. Let's get some wings. Vampires or werewolves? Vampires. Android or Apple? This is an iPhone, and my lap right here is an iPad, and a Mac is right there, so I think, yes, I'm an Apple guy. Adam Sandler or Jim Carrey? Jim Carrey. Jim Carrey is one of my favorite actors of all time. He was my first favorite actor, and I love Adam Sandler, so it's hard to pick Jim Carrey over Adam Sandler, but gotta go with my heart. Vin Diesel or The Rock? Oh, my God. Vin Diesel's not a great actor, and you could argue The Rock's not a great actor either, but The Rock gets the edge because I'm also a huge WWF fan or WWE fan, and The Rock is one of the all-time greats when it comes to the wrestling business. He still pops up every now and again, and will get a huge pop from me, so we're going to go with The Rock on that one. Ben Stiller or Will Smith? Now, this is tough because, and it's funny, you did a perfect job kind of matching them up because, they're very similar to each other. They're great actors when they want to be. They also can be really funny. This is tough. I'm going to go with Will Smith. Cake or pie? I'm 100% a cake guy. Ice cream or donuts? Ooh, now that's tough because when it comes to sweets, honestly, I don't differentiate. I love sweets. I will give myself diabetes probably one day just because I have such a huge sweet tooth. But ice cream or donuts? I'm going to go with ice cream. Mint chocolate chip ice cream. That was a great question. Frank's ex-wife. Thank you so much, buddy. And the next question is from Lorenzo Harris. Man of God. What 5 movies would you watch in your hospital bed if you only had 48 hours to live? So this would basically be the movies that I choose to watch right before I die. So right at the top of that list, Lorenzo, is always going to be The Terminator. My favorite film ever. It's like comfort food for me. So if I'm going to watch a movie that day, those 2 days, I'm absolutely going to watch The Terminator. I'm going to watch Pulp Fiction because those are my top 2 favorite movies, and then Batman 89. And then to wrap it up, because I just think that these 2 movies are almost perfect, I'm going to have to go with The Godfather 1 and 2 and watch those back to back. Because, those movies just... and it ties into a question we're going to talk about in a second, but yeah, those movies are just so perfect, so great, and there's so many movies. It's hard to pick just 5 movies to watch, and in 48 hours, I can watch more than 5 movies, and that's all I'm going to want to do since, that's my favorite thing to do. But those would be my 5 movies. They'd be Pulp Fiction, The Terminator, Batman 1989, and then, of course, the first 2 Godfather movies. But that's really tough to pick. And that's a great question, Lorenzo. And again, that ties into another question from Timmy the Movie Fan, who said, "What's the greatest character arc you've seen in film?" And I guess this might be cheating, but because it's not just one movie, but the character arc of Michael Corleone from the beginning of the first Godfather film all the way through the end of the second Godfather film is definitely the greatest character arc in film history. He starts out as this innocent guy. He's in the Marines. He's coming back to his family. He even says to Kay, to Diane Keaton, "That's my family, Kay. That's not me." Well, it would end up being him, and he would end up becoming one of the coldest, ruthless human beings you could ever imagine. The man ends up killing his brother, Fredo. Innocent Fredo. Little stupid Fredo, but he ends up killing innocent Fredo at the very end of the second not personally, he has someone else do it. God forbid he did it himself. But this man who just he was so honorable. He didn't want to be a part of this with his family. He ends up becoming the Don and becoming a much, much colder Don than his father ever was. His father, who he wants to make proud. His father would be so disappointed in the man he ends up being. It's so tough. It's so tough how his character, and that is the greatest arc in film history. There's some other great arcs, like, Bill Murray does this arc in a lot of his movies, like similar thing like Tom Cruise, the asshole who needs to learn his lesson. But I think it works out perfectly in Groundhog Day. I love his arc in Groundhog Day. You could also look at Truman in The Truman Show, played by Jim Carrey. That character's arc, how he started out. I mean, this guy doesn't even know he's on a reality show. By the end of the movie, he's ready to go to get out there and actually live a real life, not under the microscope. So the way we start that movie and then the way we end it, that is a crazy good character arc as well. So thank you, Timmy, the movie fan. I appreciate that question as well. And the next question is from our channel director, Mr. Smelly Potato, and he said, with so many movies and limited time, do you worry you may never discover a potential favorite movie? And I'm so glad you asked this, because this is something that I've struggled with, not just recently with the YouTube channel, but for years, is I love movies. So anytime I get a chance to watch a movie, and I try and watch like one movie a day, so that's over 300 movies a year. And I probably watch, rewatch like 100 to like 150 movies a year, like that I've seen before. And then I probably like watch like 100 to 150 brand new movies each year that come out the year of. So because I'm doing that, I don't necessarily have enough time to like let the movie sit and marinate. And it's usually not until I rewatch the movie that it ends up becoming like one of my favorites. A good example of this is like my favorite movie from a couple of years ago, Babylon. That movie wasn't even my number one movie when I made my favorite movies list of 2022. It wasn't until I watched it again, and then I thought, yeah, this is the best movie of that year. And that's a movie that every time I watch it, it does slowly rise up my list. But it's tough because, you see so many movies. You let it sit with you for like a day, and then you watch another movie the next day. You got to hope that that movie sits with you and doesn't disappear from your memory. But most people's favorite movies are movies like that they grew up with, like The Terminator. That's a movie that was my favorite movie when I was a kid. I've grown up with it. Batman 89. The most recent addition to my favorite movies list of all time is Paris, Texas. I didn't see that movie for the first time until 2020, and that movie just hit me like a brick wall. Same thing with The Worst Person in the World. That movie like hit me with like a brick wall. It's in the criteria. That's another one that is rising up my favorites all time list because it resonated with me. But over the course of like 4 years, only two or three movies I would say would be considered like some movies that would be considered my favorites of all time. So I do worry about that just because I take in so many different movies, and I'm sure you guys all do the same thing as well, where you're watching a new movie each night, maybe going like a marathon, watch like 2 or 3 movies in a day. I like to do that on my days off when I get the chance, as long as I've got no chores to do. But again, you don't let that movie marinate. You just like you're consuming, and that's the big thing again in the world today with TV shows. We all like to we all like to binge watch stuff, but you don't let it marinate. You don't let it stick with you. You're not thinking about it for like days. That's always the ultimate movie test. I was thinking about this earlier because Glenn Powell, he was in Twisters this year, and he was also in Hitman, and people put Hitman on like their best movies list. I watched Hitman. For the love of God, I cannot remember that movie at all, and it's only been a few months, so that's a bad sign. That means that the movie didn't stick with me, because there's movies that I watched in January that I absolutely love that might make my top 10 movies of the year list, that I can play the movie verbatim in my head. So I mean, is that so that's a sign that movie really probably wasn't that good, because I do have a pretty good like long-term memory where I could play back like most of the movies in my head that I've seen, even if I've only seen them once. But if I'm not able to play that back, then that means that movie probably wasn't that great. But I do worry all the time, like, am I possibly sitting down to watch a future favorite movie? But another thing that plays a big part in is your mood on that day. That's why, like, when certain critics say, I have to take myself out of it, I try and do the same thing. Like, try and like wash away everything that's going on in the world and just take the movie in for what it is. It's very hard if like you're having a really miserable day and you're going into the theater, and just try and forget about like what's going on in the outside world. That's why I love going to the theaters, because it does give you that opportunity. But there are times, you're really tired, it's been a really long fucking week, and you go into the movies and you're hoping you're going to see a great one, but it doesn't resonate with you, and you're like, no, is it me or was it the movie? It's tough. You got to like kind of be honest with yourself at those points, and then maybe rewatch it again down the line. But I feel like always when a critic says that they take themselves out of it and they just watch the movie for what it is, I truly find that that's impossible. Everyone has certain tastes in movies. We could all watch a movie and appreciate it, but I mean, to put like a movie you don't necessarily love as like the best movie of the year just because like you feel like you have to do that, that's always one of those things that, like, because you're afraid of like the blowback. That's always one of those things where I'm like, as a critic, like, I would rather you be honest than try and fit in with the other critics. But I guess it's a dirty game in a way. But as far as finding like a favorite film, yeah, these are the struggles that I definitely struggle with. So that was a great question, Mr. Smelly Potato. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much, buddy. And the next question is from Sprazy110. He said, pleasant surprises or disappointments from the Golden Globe nominees. So the Golden Globes have actually changed a lot. And I'm somebody, it's like a drug. I always come back to it. I don't necessarily take the award season too seriously, but I'm a huge film fan. So, of course, when the award season comes around, I end up always running back to it and wanting to see what gets nominated for awards. What really kills me, though, is like we always kind of seem to forget about things that come out earlier in the year, and we just kind of concentrate on stuff that comes out towards the end of the year. I feel like people are just kind of like watching movies with blinders on at this point in the year. Like, how many movies get nominated for Academy Awards or Golden Globes, and then a year later nobody's talking about them? For example, I don't think Denis Villeneuve got nominated for Best Director. He absolutely deserved that. I'm not the world's biggest Dune 2 fan, but the direction of that film is phenomenal. To direct a big epic like that, he deserved that nomination, but he didn't get it. But the pleasant surprise for me is the Substance getting all the recognition that it's getting. That movie I finally watched for the first time last night. I don't want to spoil the review because the review will be up in like because I'm doing that review for Frank. That's his director review for the month of December. I don't want to spoil that review, but I loved that movie. It is one of the best movies of 2024, so I'm so happy to see the lead actresses getting recognition for it, the movie itself getting recognition, the director getting recognition. That was a pleasant surprise. A body horror film like that, I mean, I get that the subject matter and the message of the movie is definitely very topical today. It makes a lot of sense, but still, it's a body horror film with some gruesome looking stuff that might turn some people off, so to see that movie getting the recognition that it is, it definitely makes me happy. Can The Substance possibly make it into the top 10 films of 2024 at the Academy Awards as one of the Best Picture nominees? I really think it will, if I'm being 100% honest. People seem to love this movie. The Academy, the Golden Globes, it's not the same voting body. You know, it used to be the Hollywood Foreign Press only voted for the Golden Globes, and it was, you know, not that many people, and they were very, very, very biased about it. So things have definitely changed. Like, this might be a glimpse of what the Academy Awards are going to be like, so we'll have to wait and see. But definitely The Substance was the thing that really stood out to me. And thank you, Sprazy, for that question. I appreciate it, buddy. And the next question is from our buddy 021OM6. I'm not sure if this has been asked, but what would be your top 10 movie theme songs of all time? And I made a list for this as well. Right up on the top, we got Up Where You Belong from An Officer and a Gentleman. This is just a great song. I listen to this song even if I'm not watching the movie. An Officer and a Gentleman is a great film. We don't got that on 4K. We've got so many other Richard Gere movies on 4K, but not that. This one is probably my number one because these are in no particular order. But Caddyshack 2, Kenny Loggins, Nobody's Fool. I just fucking love the song. The movie Caddyshack 2 is atrocious, but the song by Kenny Loggins, that's Kenny Loggins' best song. And this is the guy who gave us Footloose. Grease from Grease. How could it not be? That's a masterpiece. This is one from Eric Clapton. I don't know if anyone's ever seen the 1996 Phenomenon, directed by, starring John Travolta. But this film also has Forrest Whitaker in it. It's a very underrated film. And it really leaves you emotional. And the Eric Clapton song changed the world. Eric Clapton had a great 1990s with, you know, this and Father's Eyes. I absolutely love. Tears in Heaven from Rush, which could have made this list as well. But if I'm going to pick one, definitely changed the world from Phenomenon. I'm going to pick that over Tears in Heaven from Rush. Purple Rain from Purple Rain. I mean, my God, it's Purple Rain. And Purple Rain, the entire album is just fantastic. I think I'm wearing a Purple Rain shirt, actually. Yeah, I am. That's my Purple Rain shirt right there. So I love Purple Rain. Living Daylights by Aha. This is my favorite Bond theme song. Of course, one Bond theme song had to get on here. And my favorite one is definitely from the 1980s by Aha. And A View to a Kill that came out by Duran Duran 3 years, I believe, before this one is also a great one. I mean, I might be a little bit biased just because of my love of the 1980s, but I got to include those on my list. I'm a huge 1990s kid. Space Jam was a big deal back in the 1990s. And I Believe I Can Fly by R. Kelly.
I believe I can fly. I believe I can touch.
Who is persona non grata. Either way, or the guy did make some great fucking music, and I Believe I Can Fly is definitely one of those songs. And I mean, if you ever seen the movie Beach, it's one of the saddest movies ever. It also stars Bette Midler and Barbara Hershey, I believe. And the song, You Are the Wind Beneath My Wings. I mean, it'll leave you heartbroken. It's a great song, too. Bette Midler, very underrated as far as, is she underrated? I don't know. St. Elmo's Fire by John Parr. St. Elmo's Fire, where's that 4K Blu-ray? But the song St. Elmo's Fire by John Parr, I like more than the actual movie. That song still kicks to this very day. It's just one of those movies, it's just one of those songs that'll get you going. And then last but not least, Bon Jovi's Blaze of Glory from Young Guns 2. Shot down in a blaze of glory. Ah, man, that song is amazing. And that is another one. So this was in no particular order. Ghostbusters and Footloose, they're great. I just think they're very overplayed. That's why they didn't make my list. Obviously, those movies are very successful. Kenny Loggins is probably most known for Footloose, but still. Caddyshack 2, Nobody's Fool. Check that song out. And that was a great question, 02106. I really appreciate that one, buddy. And the next question is from Haunted Pillowcase, and he said, what's your opinion on the movie Kinds of Kindness? So this was directed by Yorgos Lanthimos. I didn't see this one in theaters, despite the fact that I'd seen every Yorgos Lanthimos movie in theaters before this. And the two movies he did before this were The Favorite and Poor Things from last year, which won Emma Stone, my favorite actress, and her second Academy Award. She was also in The Favorite. And, those two movies I didn't entirely love. Poor Things especially. I love the production design of that, like the steampunk design of that movie. I got some big laughs out of me, especially from like Mark Ruffalo. Her and Willem Dafoe are great. It's a great, well-made movie. I appreciated that movie a lot, but I walked out of it going, that was really good, but not great. Now when I watch Kinds of Kindness, bringing back Emma Stone, Willem Dafoe, but also bringing in Jesse Plemons in another one of the lead roles. The three of them, it's an anthology film, so there's 3 segments. They all star in each segment in different roles, and also actually everybody in this movie, they all star in these different segments in different roles. All of them have very similar themes. They all have like acts of kindness in them, and they're mostly sacrifices for somebody else who kind of might have manipulated them into doing these things. There's also like black and white flashbacks in each one of these. They're all very quirky, very Yorgos Lanthimos. Some stuff that might not stick out to other people, or maybe get under other people's skins, make them uncomfortable. But for me, this movie really, really worked. This is actually going to make my top 10, barring something that slips in there. This will probably make my top 10 films of 2024. I just absolutely love this movie. Like I said, Yorgos Lanthimos, he directed The Lobster, The Killing of a Sacred Deer. I find none of his movies to be rewatchable, but that all changed with this movie. And again, it's an anthology film, so of course we're hurrying through all 3 of these stories at a pretty quick rate, so I think it's paced phenomenally. The end of the third one is so fucked up. It's unbelievable how they chose to end it. And that's right after, I don't want to spoil it, I guess, but I mean, you've seen Emma Stone dancing in the trailer. For some reason, that's like just mesmerizing to me, and she does it in this movie. Willem Dafoe, Jesse Plemons is a standout. Again, they all play different characters, but they all do such a great job. All 3, I would say if I was going to rank the segments, I would go 3, 1, 2. I think 2 was definitely the weakest of them, but 2 still, I mean, I want to do like a full breakdown of this movie one day. I don't know if you guys would be into that, because I don't know how many people, but it just left me thinking so much. And I was seeing other people's complaints about this, like, how it's like all artsy fartsy. And I really think the movie made sense. Does it give you the answers to every question? Do you have to do some searching yourself? Absolutely. It doesn't give you all the answers to all the questions, but I still think that really does work for this movie. Overall, I think it works fantastically what they were going for with this movie. I get that it might seem a little pretentious to some people. I completely understand that. But to me, this movie just checked a lot of boxes. Emma Stone is fantastic. Jesse Plemons, Willem Dafoe, they all do such a great job. The stories themselves are very interesting. This is one of those movies you don't want to pick your phone up because you're just so enthralled in it. And I can highly recommend Kinds of Kindness. It's on Hulu right now. So thank you again, Haunted Pillowcase. That was great as well. Next question's from Kevin Kruger, and he said, how would you rank the Arnold Schwarzenegger movies in your Blu-ray collection? And actually, surprisingly, despite my love for Arnold Schwarzenegger, I actually don't have the world's biggest Arnold Schwarzenegger movie collection. Some very noticeable things that are missing is going to be the Red Dawn 4K Blu-ray, The Last Action Hero 4K Blu-ray, Red Heat. I don't have, what did I say, Red Dawn? I meant Red Heat on 4K Blu-ray. I don't have that. I also don't have like Eraser on Blu-ray. I don't have Jingle All the Way on Blu-ray. These are like movies that I'm waiting for them to like come to 4K Blu-ray. So I don't really have the greatest Arnold Schwarzenegger collection. But either way, or let's rank them from worst to first. And it's a combination of the quality of the 4K Blu-ray and the film. And this is a decent 4K Blu-ray, but the movie itself is dog shit. I'm actually upset that I own this 4K Blu-ray, and that's Terminator Genisys. Next up, Terminator Dark Fate. This movie's fine, but we make the Terminator, the T-800, we have him selling carpet? I mean, there's just so many questions. We shot Eddie Furlong's John Connor in the face. I felt like my childhood got shot in the face. The 4K Blu-ray is fine. It suffers from a lot of modern film problems in this. I did enjoy it. When I watched this 4K Blu-ray, I like this movie a little bit less than I did in theaters, but it's fine. I mean, this is Arnold Schwarzenegger's second best film, but these 4K Blu-rays are atrocious. And yes, I own 2 of them. I had to get this Steelbook. One of the rare exceptions that I bought a movie just based solely on packaging. It was this Terminator 2 4K Steelbook. I couldn't resist the Terminator fan in me, despite the fact I don't watch these 4Ks. Next up, it's Terminator 3, which is in this collection, which is actually funny. And this is one of the first things that I bought when I started this collection. Of course, the huge Terminator fan I am. But, you know, you got Terminator 1, 2, 3, and Salvation in here. At the time, that's all that was out. Salvation, does that count as an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie? I mean, like, we have the T-800s in there. They're modeled after Arnold, but he doesn't appear in the movie. I think he was still the Governor at that point. Salvation was a pretty big deal for me. I think it was summer of 2008 as well. That summer was just huge. Next up, True Lies. I love this movie, but this 4K, we know the issues that this had with the AI DNR, and I'm still happy to have this on 4K Blu-ray, have this movie in my collection. I understand why other people might be more disappointed than I am with this one, but I'm definitely glad to have it. True Lies, it's a great movie. Next up, something I was hoping we would have got more of. We get the slipcover over the Steelbook for The Running Man. This is one of the most underrated Arnold Schwarzenegger movies from 1987, I believe. It's just such an enjoyable time. Arnold Schwarzenegger plays a guy. He gets framed. He basically gets put on the Hunger Games. You know, he has to somehow win the game, the Running Man, or he'll die. It's either you die or you win. And, of course, it's Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's banging out one-liners in this movie. And, of course, he says, I'll be back. But what I really love is this 4K Blu-ray. It's a very colorful 4K. I mean, this is one I watch every single year now. I mean, I always liked the Running Man, but this 4K Blu-ray rejuvenated my love for this movie. And it really became a once-a-year watch for me when it really wasn't before this 4K. And we'll give this one a tie, even though I think Conan the Barbarian is better than Conan the Destroyer by a mile. I know there's people who like Destroyer more, but I'm a bigger Barbarian fan. And these 4K Blu-rays from Arrow Video are fantastic. I was trying to think of all the 4Ks that came out. I believe this came out right at the beginning of the year in January. I just love the Arrow Video hard cases, and I love the Conan the Barbarian. The Destroyer is fine. I had some great jokes in there. I love the follow-up with the camel. And now the top 2, even though this has no special features on it, I thought this was a huge upgrade, and that is Kindergarten Cop, one of the best. And you'll also notice I don't have Twins in here, again, directed by Ivan Reitman. Twins just has a Blu-ray release from Shout Factory. I keep anticipating a 4K Blu-ray for Twins coming out. That's why I haven't pulled the trigger on that. Twins is one of my favorite Arnold movies, but Kindergarten Cop, this is a movie I grew up with as well. I've seen it on VHS, horrible VHS, like burned the shit out of that VHS because I watched it so much. So to see it in all its glory on 4K Blu-ray, I have to put Kindergarten Cop on the list. And then at number 1, even though the Blu-ray isn't as good as the 4K Blu-ray, I'm putting the Terminator at number 1. I know you guys saw this coming from a mile away, but I had to do it. The Arnold fan in me, the Terminator fan in me, that's my favorite movie of all time, and thankfully we got a great 4K Blu-ray out of it. Got nothing to complain about. So that was a great question as well, Kevin. I really do appreciate that. Thank you so much, buddy. Next question is from Dark Room Reviews, and he said, have you had any bad movie theater experiences? And I've actually had a few. Most recently, lately it's gotten actually worse to the point where it's like even tough to go to movies like with a crowd because kids come in these theaters and they're on their phones, they're talking to each other. I never wanted to be that guy. I didn't want to become that old man that goes up to kids and says, hey, well, quiet down, you're in a fucking movie theater. But I have become that guy because it's just getting way out of hand. It's very unfortunate. There's just no movie theater etiquette anymore, and I hate complaining about it because I want people to go to the movies, but it's just so noticeable at this point. So it's happened to me a couple times. But last year, what was it called? The Blackening. I wanted to go see that movie that came out last year. I think it was called The Blackening. So I went to the movie theater, and about halfway through the movie, somebody pulled the fire alarm, and that's it. They just gave us free tickets for the movie. Even though we bought popcorn, actually, it wasn't even halfway. It was like a third of the way through the movie. We hadn't even finished our popcorn or candy or anything like that yet. And they're like, oh, well, someone put the fire alarm. It's 11, so that's it. We'll give you guys some free tickets. We're sorry. I guess that's fine, but it's like I spent all that movie on concessions. I didn't even get to enjoy it. I drove all the way out here to watch this movie, and I didn't even get to see it. So that was a bad movie theater experience. And like 10 years before that, when I went and saw The Conjuring, the same thing happened, but this time it was a little bit different because there was a horrible thunderstorm going on outside, and the power went out. And that was a little bit more understanding because at least it was only out for like 10 minutes and then the movie came back on and then they still gave us the free voucher. So they made up for that. Those are probably the worst movie theater experience I've had. Overall, I've been, I see so many movies to only have a few mixed in there. It's not that bad. It's just like lately it's getting just worse and worse. I hope it's not just me just getting older and becoming a curmudgeon, but I feel like like kids nowadays, you know? One of those things. And the next question is from Wolf Viking, and he said, I had the Blu-ray for Demolition Man. Should I upgrade? And my question for Saturday is, what top 10 movies should we watch on Christmas Eve and Christmas? I'll be probably watching Tales from the Dark Side, Season of the Belief. So I made a list for this as well, and this is different. This is different than like my favorite Christmas movies, because we've done that. You can't watch all Christmas movies on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day. Like, I wouldn't recommend Black Christmas. I even wouldn't recommend my favorite Christmas movie, It's a Wonderful Life. What I would recommend, and this is number one, it's not really in any particular order, but the ultimate Christmas movie on Christmas Day is A Christmas Story. I don't think any movie nailed Christmas Day better than Christmas Morning and A Christmas Story. So you have to watch that one on Christmas Day. It plays on TBS all day, but the 4K is great. Number two, Christmas Vacation. They don't end up on Christmas Day, but the movie ends on Christmas Eve. It's an all-timer. It's something you can watch with the entire family. You'll be quoting it. Christmas Vacation's a masterpiece. Number three, Elf. I just rewatched this last night. Another great Warner Brothers 4K Blu-ray. It ends on Christmas Eve, not Christmas Day. But, I mean, it's Elf. It's one of the greatest Christmas movies out there. Next up, I got Almost Christmas. This is one that stars Danny Glover. And it's a sad movie, but it's also a very happy movie, very funny. But at the beginning of this movie, we get to see Danny Glover and his wife, how they came up, bought this house, raised their family, and then she passes away. And it's the Christmas after she passed away. Danny Glover wants to make her sweet potato pie that he just loved, but he can't find her, her recipe box, which pays off in the stupidest way possible. It was literally in the kitchen. I don't understand. It was just in the cabinet and did nobody look for it. But regardless, it's a Christmas movie. It's very cliched, but I actually thought it was really funny. It's a really nice one if you haven't seen it. Violent Night. This is one that came out. Another one of those like almost modern Christmas classics. Violent Night, I think, will kind of go on people's list, starring David Harbour. It's basically just Die Hard, but instead of John McClane, we actually get Santa Claus. He's got to infiltrate, save the hostages, and it's also just really, really funny. And it really revamped the Bryan Adams Christmas song. That song's just fantastic. Next up, Four Christmases, starring Vince Vaughn. I think Renee Zellweger. This one just was very relatable for me because as somebody who, my parents are divorced, my wife's parents are divorced, so when they all lived in New York, we literally would have to do fucking 4 Christmases. It would drive us nuts. We didn't really get to enjoy the holiday because we're just like, all right, we're going to be here for like 2 hours, but then we got to go to my dad's house, and then we got to go to her dad's house, and then we're going to go to my mom's, and then we're going to go to her mom's. It's ridiculous. And you watch this movie and you think, there's just no way that people could experience Christmas like that. I'm telling you, Faith and I have experienced Christmases like this. Like, we honestly almost dread Christmas Day a lot of the time because we have to go to all these places. Luckily, a lot of our family is like now spread out through the country, so we only have like 1 or 2 stops on Christmas Day now. Thank God, because it becomes a chore. Klaus. This is the animated film on Netflix. You really guys should see this movie. Jason Schwartzman plays a mailman in this movie. And it's kind of about like the origins of Christmas, I believe. It's about like kind of like the origins, how they started delivering gifts. It's a beautiful movie if you haven't seen it. Scrooge. That one ends on Christmas Eve as well. It's just a Christmas Carol, but it's the best version of the Christmas Carol, starring Bill Murray. Again, a schmuck who has to learn his lesson. That's what Bill Murray does best, and he's a real piece of shit. He's a real Scrooge at the beginning of this one. Home Alone. It ends Christmas morning. How do you not watch Home Alone? It's a classic. What more do I have to say about Home Alone? And then, of course, the last ones you have to watch are like the Christmas specials. I forget the name. I always forget the name of like the guy who made these, but those claymation Christmas specials that came out in the 1960s. Santa Claus is coming to town, or A Year Without a Santa Claus. The Heat Miser, Cold Miser stuff. That stuff is also catchy. It still holds up to this very day, over 50 years later. So that's the stuff you have to watch on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day. The last question is from Tom Cruise's burner account. And what's a true story that you think would make a great movie? And funny enough, we're definitely gonna get this movie sometime down the line. But the guy who killed that United Healthcare CEO, they're going to make a movie about that, I guarantee it. And it would be a very fascinating movie because of everything that happened. I'm not going to go into the full details of everything that's happened with that case. I'm sure you guys have seen it's all over the place. The guy just got caught. But, what happened online and the reaction to everybody online kind of like celebrating the guy's death and everything like that, and how this guy kind of became a martyr. It's going to make a very fascinating film. It's definitely going to make a very fascinating Netflix series one day. But if you can make a movie about it, I can guarantee if it's done right, it'd be a very interesting film. This story isn't done yet, so I would imagine like 3 or 4 years down the line, we would get this movie. That was a great question as well, Tom Cruise's burner account. I hope I answered everyone's question. I really do think I did this week. If I didn't, please let me know in the comment section below. If I didn't, I'll make sure I get get to it next week. And make sure you guys leave your questions for next week's show in the comment section below. I love doing this show, and I really appreciate all you guys sending in these questions. Thank you guys all so much. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you did, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Make sure you guys check out our channel memberships if you want to become a friend of the channel, a producer like John Doe Juggalo and Jed Eckert, or you can become a channel director like Frank from Frank's Media and Reviews and Mr. Smelly Potato. Make sure you guys are checking out John Doe Juggalo and Frank from Frank's Media and Reviews YouTube channels. They're great, and you won't be disappointed by them. But of course, guys, if you got no money to throw away, don't worry about it at all. All I really hope is that you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, get out in those streets, tell your friends about us, and then we'll be seeing you around.